Hello.
Hello.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls.
And the rest of us.
Welcome to World Poetry Day.
Oh yeah, well, Mama.
You know, I found a friend of mine in the UK who's I'm a literary magazine editor, and he says, "Oh, I'm real excited. I'm doing a show on World Poetry Day." I'm like, "What? World Poetry?" And all my synapses are misfiring. I'm like, there should be something here for it. It's been something that's been named a day since '99, and I thought there hasn't been anything here, so I might as well just get a chance for us to get together and read. And I told anybody that comes by they could read about anything they want to.
Oh, okay.
I was just thinking that if I'm going to look for pieces, I would look for things about anything from around the world. So I've
That's
just grabbed
exactly.
a big old stack of poems that have all different stories from different places.
Yep.
This one's actually from the United States, but this one's called Freedom Just Past the Fence. After working for the Army for years on repairing jet engines, I ended up being stationed in Pennsylvania one summer repairing air conditioners and refrigerators. I'd only do a little work and then have nothing to do for a day or two. But the thing I remember is that at the time, Cubans were defecting to the United States by boat. They'd sail to Florida, and most of them would be dehydrated and all of them be malnourished. The U.S. government didn't want them spreading diseases in our country, so when the Cubans would arrive off the coast of Miami, the military would be waiting to make sure they were healthy. Well, all I knew was that they would get all of these Cubans into trucks that we call cattle cars, and there'd only be a few benches on them, and they'd truck them up to Pennsylvania.
Joe, your offer's ready.
Where I am. And the military gave them some shots to make sure that they weren't dying. So these people, after escaping their country in a shoddy wooden boat, were taken by the U.S. military, headed in a boxed-in truck and shipped to the country so that they could be given shots and detained. These Cubans, who came here wanting freedom, now have to wait in a fenced-in area until they are tested and given food. And it was my job to make sure that their fridge and air conditioner was working. So I'd sit there for a day or two at a time, drinking cans of beer, and looking out my window. I had a view of the razor-thin wire fence, and all I remember is seeing all of these Cubans leaning on the chain-link fence, wondering if this is what it was like to be free, holding on to the metal, looking out to what they were sure was freedom. Get applause or not. This is about traveling different places, especially when you're an American going to places, and I like the fact that it's called My Kind of Town. After walking through the Forbidden City in Beijing, China, where all the palace doorways had gold-covered risers blocking people's way into rooms 4 inches to a foot tall, because the higher your level of your authority or royalty status in the kingdom, the higher the bar people had to step over, and not on, but over, to get inside the royalty's room. But after the Forbidden City, I entered the Summer Palace. An old Chinese man walked up to me with what I believe was his granddaughter walking 1 foot behind. Though, who knows, in China this one young girl could have been one of his concubines, but it's really not for me to judge. But this older Chinese gentleman walked up to me and asked, in the best English he could muster, where I was from. So I told him the United States, and then I said, Chicago. And that's when this man's eyes lit up, and he said, my kind of town. And I laughed, nodding my head in agreement. And then he leaned in toward me and he said, Frank Sinatra sang that. Yeah. And I laughed. Yes, he did, I said. Because even though this world is so vast, we can always find ways to connect with one another. Yep. This one is about us being all American, I guess. This is called Been a World Leader. People can think that Americans are cocky and arrogant because we've been a world leader for so long. Because even though our cars are from Korea, our electronics are from Japan, and we owe China billions, better cars come from Germany, better beers come from Germany, and there are better wines and champagnes in France. I mean, because even though we've been thrust into this global economy that Al Gore pushed us into by creating the internet, us Americans still seem to want to rest on our own past laurels to the next millennium. And once I stopped for a beer at München, where the female bartender tended bar for like 3 very old German gentlemen and 1 very out-of-place American. Barely knowing German, I figured I could just sit there, say a beer name on a tap, pay in euros, and leave it at that. But at one point, after the jukebox in the far corner that I never even noticed started playing some new American-sounding pop song, one of the old German men turned to me and started yelling at me in German. Holding my Franziskaner draft, my eyes turned to saucers. I was unable to say a word to this old German man yelling at me in a language I could not decipher. And that's when the bartender yelled back at the old man in German, then English. They didn't play that song. I did. So I smiled at the bartender and finished my beer, realizing that us Americans can still get into trouble without saying a word. This one is called Enough's Enough. Once while I was in Bad Gastein, where the Alps in Austria gave every street in town a 60-degree incline, I signed up for a bus tour to go to a radon cave at nearby mining mountain. Waiting outside for the bus, I stood with something like 17 German-speaking Austrians. There I felt so out of my element. I was almost dying for any American voice saying any words. And that's when I heard a boisterous baritone. So I made my way to this booming, distinctly American voice. I merely asked, "American?" And the large man heard my inflection and immediately spoke. "Hi, I'm Frank, and the little missus here is Mildred." And this petite, subservient Midwestern woman was standing with this almost perfectly circular, melodramatic man, and all I could think of was like a perfect 10 with the two of them there. Frank then asked where I was from, and when I said Chicago, he sprung into starting on his speech, schlepping his words. "Oh, we're from Detroit. I worked at GM for 35 years, and now that the kids are all grown up with my pension, I thought I'd take a little missus here to see the Alps." And that's when I realized that I could have stood at 50 paces, and I still could have heard Frank telling the entire neighborhood the epic of his life. And that's when it occurred to me how loud us Americans are. Because when first traveling through Europe after the War on Terror began, the United States government and had airlines wanting to inform Americans that were traveling abroad that if they were concerned about being a conspicuous target by looking too American, they offered these simple guidelines. Don't wear a university sweatshirt. Don't wear a sports team baseball cap. Don't chew gum. Don't yell. And I can imagine Frank now yelling, "Mildred," right? So I made a point to not sit near Frank and Mildred on the bus, but that was okay. I could still hear them from rows away as we made our way through the mountain range. And to the Austrians on the tour who did speak English, a part of me wanted to tell them, not all Americans are that loud. Because even if us Americans want to rest on our laurels, sometimes some of us have to know when enough's enough. I do not have a smartphone, so I have no idea, and I have no watch, so I have no idea.
There's a clock up there.
Oh, well then, 10 minutes or something, maybe, if I'm lucky. I'm trying to remember, but thank you for that. I was talking about Europe stuff, so I have only one thing I think written about China, so this is the little differences. I know things are really different in China, but Shanghai and Beijing are urban areas, so a lot of things really seem similar. I mean, you saw signs on the walls and the streets in Chinese, but you understood how to get around and what to do. I swear, what I remember the most are the little differences. Like McDonald's, I got an Egg McMuffin because I've seen signs in French for ouf McMuffins. So when I ordered one in Beijing, I got a hamburger bun for a muffin. Is that an egg hamburger? I don't know. And it was covered with ketchup and mayo. I swear, it was drowning. And so I just wiped some of it off with my index finger and chalked it up to knowing those little differences. Like in Shanghai, we went to Starbucks because even in China, there's still one at every corner. And John and I like these white chocolate frappuccinos. So Jim asked if they had any white chocolate. And the woman behind the counter said, "No, we only have black chocolate." And I thought, there's no way you could say that in the United States. I don't know. But knowing that a good part of China lives in squalor, we saw that everything was hanging their clothes out to dry. Jim said that in China, they'd have to build a ton of new plants just to supply the power for all these dryers that people can't even afford, so clothing dryers don't exist. China has no Medicare or government health care plan. Don't say the United States is free of government intervention. So people save their money for accidents. And that's a good thing because we saw rickety bamboo stalks used for ladders and scaffolding for Chinamen for repairing and cleaning high rises. But you have to remember these little differences. I mean, a stop sign is still a red octagon even if you don't know the language it's in. Even Coke has print in both languages on the cans. But you know, sometimes the funny things about China, they're the little differences. Alright, this is a longer one, and I'm gonna leave that for anything for my foreign travel one. This one is called Communication 2015. Now that we have the information superhighway, we can throw out into the open our screams or our cries for help so much faster than we could before. But what if we don't want to communicate or forget how? Too busy leaving messages, voicemails, emails, phone numbers, or forgetting to call back? What if we forget how to communicate? When I was young, I felt like the world was the size of a thimble because all I needed to know was my backyard when I played with my neighbor. And I know I wasn't allowed to ride my bike far, but when I collected enough change, I'd ride my bike all the way to my local ice cream parlor. But once I was on my own, commuting to my Chicago job in the L train, I suddenly felt like a tiny dot in this universe, crammed in like sardines in an L train tin can, saving money for a road trip to Omaha, Nebraska. The idea of buying a brie sandwich and eating at a street-side table in Paris, or skipping the nesting dolls for a balalica in Russia, or photographing a finch in flight on the Galapagos Islands, those dreams seriously seemed a solar system away. But as time wore on, I learned that I could get myself out to the world through the internet. And now being a magazine editor, I interact with people throughout the United States. This is a list from Canada, England, Ireland, Italy, Belgium, Malta, Norway, Japan, Russia, Slovenia, South Africa, Turkey, India, Israel, Pakistan, and Iran. While selling photography, my job, I've had to learn more Spanish as well. So the last time I sang my song, What We Need in Life, I wanted to try to learn it in different languages. So G translated into Espanol, Que necesitamos en la vida, or Nate translated it into German, Was wird das Leben brachten, and I could go on with languages here for you know. I really like Karina, who translated it into Romanian, Shavem navoia în viață. It's really fun to do these. Actually, Irma from the Philippines translated it into Tagalog, 17 syllables. Maga kalangang espiritual sabuhay. So there are many, many ones that we would learn. Oh, I won't even name the rest of them here because I've done enough. Because really, now that I've been dipping my foot in this global wading pool, I should really learn how to communicate a little better. Because now that we have the information superhighway, we can throw out into the open our screams, our cries for help so much faster than we could before. Our pleas become computer blips, tiny bits of energy traveling through razor-thin wires, traveling through space. to be left for someone to decipher when they find the time. You see, I wanted to get in touch with an old friend of mine from high school, Vince, and the last thing I heard is he was like at Marquette University, but that was years ago. He could be anywhere. I talked to a friend or two that knew him, but they had lost touch with him too. So I searched on the internet to see if his name was on a website or if he had an email address. He didn't. So I figured I probably wouldn't find him. And all this time, I knew his parents probably lived in the same house they always did. I could just look up his parents' phone number and call them and say, "Hi, I'm an old friend of Vince's." But I never did. And then I realized why. You see, I could search the internet for hours and no one would know that I was looking for someone. But now, with a single phone call, I'd make it known to his entire family that I wanted to see him enough to call, even after all these years. They didn't want that, of course, so I never called. And now that we have the information superhighway, we can throw out in the open our screams, our cries for help so much faster than we could before. But then the question begs itself, who is there to listen?